Call the meeting to order for Improvement Plan Committee of City of Stoughton, Wednesday, August 23rd, 7 p.m. I'll first do the roll call. Dave or Mayor, are you planning on doing that, or
I can
do
do
that?
Pardon me?
I can help you out with that. So we have Caravello. Here. Schumacher. Here. President Hirsch.
Here.
Reeves.
Here.
Sherlucky.
Here.
Jensen. Here. And Majewski.
Oh,
We're all here,
present in the
and we have
room.
a couple, one extra online. Awesome.
Wow. All right. We are certified in compliance with open meetings law. Looking at Dave, just nod. And next item on the agenda is the approval. Oops, there goes the. You just took it away.
All right, there you go.
Approval of the minutes from August 17th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion by Majewski, second by Reeves. Does anybody have any comments, changes, edits to the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is communications. First, any communications amongst the alders or mayor? Nope. Okay, it's Dave. Give us some communications about Badger Book and the asphalt zipper.
Well, the Badger book's just an update based on questions that you had last time. The thermal printer prints that little sheet of paper that once you receive it, you can go get your ballot. So that's all it's used for. And yes, we are required to keep one physical copy of the poll books. So the clerk's office prints that out.
Okay.
But that's not printed with the thermal paper.
Okay, great, thank you. And the asphalt zipper?
Brett provided some updated numbers, and the packet includes the documentation that he included with it. So I just threw it in the packet in case anybody felt like reading through it. I wouldn't be able to answer any questions, but it's there.
And that's been reflected into the spreadsheets already?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next item is the mill rate versus tax levy dollars. You're gonna give us a nice overview of how to calculate that?
Yeah, the kind of first slide is the one that was messed up for the first night, so I thought I'd do that one now. Everybody should be able to see. Okay, so mill rate, as I had said previously, it's essentially the property tax rate on $1,000 of assessed value. And the formula for calculating it's easy, or easy for a math person, I guess. Total levy divided by equalized value times 1,000 equals the mill rate. So basic math, if the numerator, the number on the top, total levy, increases by a smaller percentage than the denominator, or the equalized value, the mill rate will have to decrease. So the numerator is our allowed net new construction. The preliminary numbers are 1.99%. The final number, they carry it out to 3 decimal points, but it's not going to be a huge amount of difference. And the denominator, the preliminary numbers is 13.66%. I haven't gone back to check the final ones yet, but the only difference would be the correction that we had to make on the Emmy Roth property. They had accidentally put it into TID 6 before and so we had to take it out of TID 6, put it into the city, and now with the TID expansion that we're working on. We're putting that same property back into TID 6, so a lot of moving around. And right now, I've just got estimates in. We're still working on debt issue 23A. But as you can see by the numbers, the mill rate is going to go down by about 50 cents or 7.18%. The operational levy, might change by 1,000 here or there, but that's pretty well stuck. So that's just kind of a high-level overview of how the math works. Anybody have any questions on that? Yes.
So if I remember what you said the last time, so the mill rate could essentially come down 7.18%, but if property values went up and you have a new assessed value, that doesn't mean everybody's going to go down 7%, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm glad you asked, because that's the next slide.
Oh, okay. Got ahead. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's go on to Lisa's question next. Okay, mill rate versus tax levy dollars. And I've said it before, but the devil is in the details. So scenario number 1, I'm just making up numbers here, but everybody's assessment went up by 12% and the tax levy amount increased by 2%. So what does that mean? The mill rate is going to decrease, but your city property tax bill will go up by 2%. So that's the simple scenario. Now we're going to get a little bit more complicated. Well, in our small city, we have only 10 houses, and we have, we like each other so much. The houses are exactly the same floor plan and everything else, so they're all assessed the same. But now we've added 2 more houses. So now instead of paying 1/10 of the property tax, you're going to pay 1/12 of the property tax. So now let's get a little bit more complicated. Stacy down the street added a pool, and her assessment went up in the prior year because of that. So now everybody's mill rate everybody else is going to decrease slightly because Stacy's went up. So she'll be paying a higher percentage of the taxes than everybody else. Getting more complicated as we go. Okay, and yes, this is definitely a made-up one. Our let's go back one. Neighboring community of Gooberville has always had their assessments very low compared to the rest of the state, and got a shame letter from the Department of Revenues, and they said fixed it. So their assessments went up by 82%, but our city only went up by 14%. So what's that mean? Okay, we're going to get really ugly here, because now we're talking neighboring communities. What happened to the school district, the tech college, and the county? Everybody interplays with it, and yeah, I could start calculating it, but I don't think you want me to get into the math tonight. So it gets really complicated really quick when you're talking dollars versus mill rate. So to paraphrase your question from earlier, Lisa, yeah, if everybody's goes up by 12%, that doesn't mean your taxes go up by 12%. Again, very high level. Anybody have any questions on the topic?
That was a great explanation, Dave. Thank you for making these word problems with multiple scenarios.
Yeah. Well, and actually they're made up examples, but it happens every time. I can tell you that when I moved up to Brown County, they historically have been 85–90% of assessed values. So people were in for a rude shock. I don't remember the number, but I heard recently that City of Janesville is reassessing, and they were telling some people, you may have a 60% increase in your assessment. Again, that doesn't mean they're going to have a 60% increase, but everybody's different. In my particular case, we added solar panels. So I will get it, not this tax bill, but the next tax bill, I'm going to go up a little bit higher than everybody else, or at least in theory, because hopefully people thinks it's more valuable.
Thank you for doing that and taking your lion's share of taxes.
Oh, you're welcome. That's it. I've just got a 2-page PowerPoint. That's all I wanted to go over. Nothing tremendous changed between the spreadsheets that we had before. The only slight tweaks, like I said, got a couple of tweaks in dollar values from Public Works, and just based upon internal conversations and where we were at, the potential parking lot for the senior center, I made the executive decision taking it out of 24, moving it into 25, because even if we wanted to move forward, we still have to do all the planning and potential property purchases and grading and everything else like that. So I don't think it'd be realistic to think we'd get it done in 24. So that's kind of the overview of where we're at. I'm going to turn over the floor now for Rodney.
Sounds good. Would you rather me share my screen, or do you want to advance them?
I can advance them.
Perfect. All right, moving into the first one. We're just trying to give you an illustration, a picture of some of the projects that we're going to be taking on in alphabetical order, generally by the building. EMS rooftop unit number 3 is scheduled for replacement. That actually has a replacement value. I think that's the only project that's planned for the EMS facility as part of this in 2025. Would be about a $25,000 item. Fire department. Do I have my sound off?
Oh, that was kind of ghostly.
I have my sound off, so hopefully that wasn't me. Is yours off? Mayor, I don't think yours is. I think it's the mayor's is on. We'll try this again, see if the gremlins are out. So we're moving on to the fire department, which would be the next one. The fire alarm panel is in need of replacement. These things have actually, unfortunately, this building was opened in 2008, but we've already exceeded the life expectancy of this fire alarm panel. Parts are even becoming more difficult to replace. This also interfaces with the Opera House as fire alarm panel. So there's really a requirement to move forward with the replacement of that panel. On the next screen, you'll see that that's about a $40,000 effort just for the fire department. So it's this is the panel, but there's also detectors in the rooms and different spaces throughout the building that interconnect with the sprinkler system, the fire alarms, and this is the annunciator panel that was shown on the screen, but it's all the heads in the different spaces of the fire department as well have to be replaced. That one's just for the fire department. Once we get to the Opera House, you'll see there's a component that will have to be done more extensively there. Moving on to the library building related improvements, we've got HVAC and air handling equipment planned. You're familiar with that project as we've already started the design work on that. In addition, we had budgeted a small amount, or not a small amount, but amount of money for 2024 or 2023 for tuck pointing at the library. What we've discovered is there's more tuck pointing that's really necessary to finish that job. So as you go to the last screen for the library, the items related to this building are itemized for 2024. The estimate right now for the air handling equipment is $150,000. We're working with a designer to get updated budget numbers to confirm those prior to adoption of this the budget for 2024, and the exterior tuck pointing. The additional updated information we've received is that we'll have to supplement the $60,000 that was budgeted for 2023 with about $40,000 more to facilitate the appropriate tuck pointing of the exterior of the library in 2024. The Opera House building, actually, this is the fire alarm and sensor replacement. This fire alarm panel has been band-aided for many years. Well, the picture doesn't even show it justice, but it's been something that's been added to and really does not meet today's standards. As I mentioned, it tries to interface with the panel that's in the fire department, not to any success. So that's really the major upgrade to the Opera House that has to take place next year. In addition, the generator, there's an automatic transfer switch that controls it. This generator actually services as emergency power for the police department area, some of the fire department area, and some of the Opera House area. So the emergency services in the public safety building, obviously the doors and the like at the fire department and a part of the Opera House are controlled by that, and that's in need of replacement as well. Right now it has to be done manually. In emergency, that's not something you want to have to try to hunt down and have take place. I have in the 2025 CIP an item I really want to talk about with the group tonight. The windows in this building were replaced in about 1980, I'll say. So they're not the original windows in the Opera House. But they're not leaking, but there might be some energy efficiencies obtained by replacing the windows. But when you start talking a $250,000 effort to potentially upgrade all the windows in that facility, I really wanted to have that dialogue with this group and the council to see whether we want to really pursue that cost effort. We do have a couple of wooden windows, oval ones that are above the fire escape on the eastern wall exterior of the building. We're looking at having those replaced separately from this, but this is really all of the windows that were replaced. You can recognize they're really not period-oriented windows. They were replaced at a time when the Opera House, the upper floor of the Opera House, didn't even have functioning windows, and the birds lived in there. For people that don't know the history, there was a great deal of deterioration that was caused by that failure, and the volunteers that actually took over the restoration of that effort, one of the primary things that they started by doing was getting it enclosed properly. A new roof, not the volunteers, but that was one of the original initial items that had to be taken care of, was the roof and the windows of that building. That was done in the 80s. The roofing was done later, but nonetheless, it's now been closed with windows that probably wouldn't be considered period specific. And if the council would want us to pursue replacement of them, we'd have to meet landmark standards and likely really evaluate what type of windows to replace them with. The 2025 stage refinishing is actually something that Bill had maintained and inserted in here last year. It's being carried forward into the same year for 2025. Much like the library, there's some tuck pointing efforts that would be appropriate to be done at the Opera House. You'll recognize there's some brick and there's some fancy stone or legacy stone work that has areas where you've got cracks in the joints that need to be corrected and tuck pointed to maintain the integrity. So that's on the radar for 2026. The next slide actually shows the cost breakdown that's anticipated by year. The fire alarm panel and the sensor replacement, pretty significant. But this is a building that houses upwards of 500 people on many events, and as you can appreciate, some of those head units are well above the stage, 50 to 60 feet up in the air, and less than perfect conditions even to get to some of those things. So that's a significant cost to make that replacement, but it is something that strongly needs to be done. The automatic transfer switch controller, we also recommend that in 2024. The window replacement, which confirmation from the committee would be appreciated or taken out of here by the committee, is proposed for 2025 along with the stage refinishing and the tuck pointing for 2026.
Do you see any opportunity for federal money to help with the windows? I mean, are there energy efficiency, or is that a stretch?
So my discussions with a couple different architectural firms is the energy efficiency improvement in windows is a tough one to really capture, a significant cost benefit to do that. If you don't have, if you don't have drafty windows and you don't have water leaking into them, they're providing some type of energy efficiency, but obviously new ones, we'd capture some efficiency, but cost-wise, I'm not aware of any grant that's going to necessarily offer us that opportunity. Next, go ahead.
So I'm curious about the window replacement, since you were discussing the,
Phil, can you put your mic on?
oh, sorry. Speaking about the window replacement, and you mentioned like the period correct component of that. So is that something that would have to go through landmarks? And
There'd be an approval process for whatever product is put in there. We replaced some of the windows at the library. We did that with them as a historic building. I'm not saying it's a problematic. It's just another step that has to be done. They'll help counsel or guide us to make sure we evaluate the windows properly for period correct appearances. I don't think that means you necessarily have to go retro back to a wood frame one. You don't have wood frame ones in there now, but you'd certainly probably improve the appearance of the overall. If you look at them now, right now they're kind of double hungs, but the upper half of the window is essentially a solid panel of masonite or some type of material that doesn't allow any light into them. So the window openings are far larger than what really are visible in those locations at this point. Moving on to kind of our department stuff. This truck is actually slated for replacement and had been identified prior. That's slated for replacement 2005. One we actually kept in the fleet longer because we had a staff person on our team that really needed one. Now we're in need of really replacing it. In 2025, we're proposing to do the comprehensive plan, a major update with community survey work involved. It'll be approaching 10 years from the last, we did a pretty major one in 2017, and again, some updates since that, but we're recommending for a major update to the comprehensive plan in 2025. Following that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Rodney, for your pickup truck,
Yep.
You're using the F-150 again? Like, it seems like all the departments are jumping on that one. Is there, I know we keep on talking, hybrids and electric vehicles, and I was just wondering if, I know they're not available right now, but is that something that the plan compartment can actually start looking into, or?
For subsequent vehicles, right now we're still working with, Brett and his team are helping us decide which vehicles would be appropriate based on, their maintenance abilities and as well as monitoring types of vehicles that would be appropriate. But nonetheless, when our subsequent vehicles, it seems like the market might be more robust for them. And I think that's probably what's been captured in some of the previous dialogue. I wasn't here for it, but
yeah.
I would guess that was kind of the message that we've been hearing is future versions and availability of those types of hybrids will
Right.
make them more suitable.
It seems like the fleet vehicles are not really being available. Brett, you have a?
Yeah, that's correct. This is just like the other F-150s. Like I said last week, we did look at the Lightnings for these, and they only offer the crew cab with the 5.5-foot box on it or bed on it, and also the price tag on those was like $72,000. So I think in the future this is the way we're going to go, or will go, as more and more of the different models of F-150s are available in the Lightning I just don't think right now is the time. But I can assure you that we're keeping our finger on the pulse of that.
Thank you. Lisa?
Rodney, do you need a truck versus a car for taking like ladders or hauling stuff? As
Yeah,
opposed to just-
field equipment is hauled in this vehicle, whether it's measuring wheels, levels, and field equipment, paint supplies, and the like for marking equipment and stuff out in the field for this particular user. The other department item is following the comprehensive plan update in 2025, we're recommending moving forward with a, if you will, a comprehensive update to the zoning code and subdivision and plating ordinances. Those ordinances are really the implementation tools available to you related to your comprehensive plan. So in my belief, you update your plan to set the vision, and then the tools to implement that plan, the primary tools are your zoning, your subdivision and plating regulations. So that's why that's sequenced in the manner that it is.
Are these new zoning codes for Stoughton, changing them, getting them?
You're always going to start with what you have, but you have the ability to start over. For many years ago, we actually implemented a number of new zoning districts. Standards for those districts were incorporated into the code then at that point. So we envisioned the land use as part of the comprehensive planning process. And then once that land use plan was put in place with a different stratification of residential, single family, twin homes, different levels of multifamily, once those were put together in the vision of the comprehensive plan, then the zoning code was put in place to implement those land use visions.
Yeah, I can add that the county is talking about as part of the housing initiative that I've been attending. Actually, tonight's the last meeting, and it's the one I couldn't make. One of their strategies is to try to develop some ordinances that provide more opportunities for housing and specifically affordable housing options. So it'll be interesting to see what the final recommendations are, and share them with Rodney and see whether or not it makes sense for us to incorporate that into our ordinances. We talk a lot about having our ordinances, consistent with our comp plan, and I think we recognize, especially on the, conditional use permits, some of our ordinances, we've received, recommendations from the city attorney to upgrade them. I think Rodney's feeling is that we probably want to do the comp plan first.
That's what I believe is the appropriate course to pursue that first. So you're trying to make sure you're comfortable with your vision for the community. It's a master plan. We call it a comprehensive plan, but really the vision of the land uses, the locations of those, any objectives that you're trying to achieve as a community can be articulated in that document. But like I said, the two major tools that you have for implementation of that document is then your zoning, your subdivision and plating ordinances. So that's why I'm proposing that timing.
And when you say the ordinance is just basically chapter 78, is that what we're focusing on, our zoning?
Chapter 78 and 70 or 66. 66 is our subdivision and plating regulations. In other words, lot layouts, configurations of streets, those types of things, street widths, terraces, all those things could come into play related to, street diet designs. All those types of things would be envisioned more likely as part of your comp plan and then placed into your ordinances for implementation moving forward.
Because we know in some of our other ordinances, we have some antiquated language. So I'm trying to figure out if that's a process that we should farm out, or if we should try to run those through the committee and at least try to chip away at them and get, appropriate language in there that reflect current times.
Yeah, certainly your ordinance book has, I don't know, 40 chapters, whatever it is. You're probably not going to try to rewrite all of those at the same time. But as you come, just like we do in our zoning and subdivision ordinances now, we occasionally make adjustments to them as we come upon things. Unfortunately, some of the times you reveal those issues is when you're evaluating a development. And then if there is an effort to change the code, it's believed that it's being caused by this development. It might really be a problematic language, but it doesn't come off proper, because then it looks like the development is causing the need for the change. So you're hopefully trying to prevent that timing and trying to, write your ordinances as solidly as you can from the outset. But you will always have the need, in my opinion, to update your ordinances.
So I have one question for you then. You said the comp plan, it's 100 grand because of the additional survey work that's involved. The $50,000 for the zoning code and ordinance update, what does that go for? Is that just additional people hours to write that, or?
It's consulting time as well as attorney time.
Okay.
Because in reality, I really think you need to have your city attorney engaged in that process to make sure you are on the same page for interpretation going forward. Okay. And so that's why that's pricey. It takes
And
that
it's
involvement.
consistent with Verona recently did theirs. It was 100,000, took them 2 years. I think Middleton is maybe in the process of doing theirs, and I've heard Sun Prairie maybe as well. So, and it's sometimes maybe you can borrow things from others, but sometimes not.
For those of you that have gone through the comprehensive planning updates and processes we've used here, community surveys became a part of it that kind of influenced, and rightly so in some cases, but we somewhat got bogged down in the community surveying process. You want to do that well. If you're going to provide a survey, I think the council all was really wanting to make sure they were getting the proper questions asked and getting information that was usable to help put together the plan. And that's why I think the 100,000 is that number, because it really reflects on the need for some independent survey work to be included in that. So on that page, okay, that's fine. We went over all those numbers. Public safety building, the existing building we're in, the upper floor on the west side of the building, the HVAC unit for that rooftop is planned to be replaced in 2024. We had funds available. We were hoping to get by with just more of the internal component upgrade in 2023. So we included $20,000 into that. We subsequently identified the need really to replace the unit, and therefore we're looking to supplement the $20,000 that's budgeted for this year with an additional $20,000 to utilize to upgrade that unit entirely.
Is that going to make this room less cold?
It will not touch this room at all. I could make it really warm in here right now if you want.
On these upgrade, Rodney, are you looking at more higher air standard features and efficiencies?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has, I'm not specifically identified, but we do look at the different filter systems that are being put into them, and often that is a higher MERV unit that does improve your air quality at the same time.
And you said it's more energy efficient too?
Yeah, it's almost more difficult to buy a unit that's not more efficient going forward. Almost all of them are at least somewhat incrementally more efficient than what we've had in the past.
What is your start, I mean, if we're looking for efficiency, you're just looking, I mean, are you trying to really get an efficient one, or just replacement value
Oh, no.
that then it's going to be efficient?
Oh, you're trying to get in that 90% efficient. And there's different types of units that you can only get so far. But yes, we're trying to, in other words, you also have the same amount of ductwork. So you have ductwork systems that are in these buildings that somewhat constrain you on certain things you can do. But the systems themselves, or the units themselves, we're trying to get in that 90% range for new units.
And is that the low, medium, or higher range these days?
Oh, that's higher than a lot of these were in the 75 to 80%.
Right, but what is the going, it goes up to what, 95,
Well,
90?
a lot of your homes potentially are in that 94, 95%. Some of your commercial ones, it's more difficult to get to that level of efficiency.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Lisa?
On the library, it looks like the HVAC is significantly more. Is that because of the ductwork and the building being built at multiple times, or?
So so we had assumed about $150,000 total, and that we'd originally thought would include the design as well. So we did move forward with the design, and that was in the $35,000 through the bidding and administration. So the $150,000 is right now what we believe to be the estimate. What the designers are actually doing is, now that they've started to narrow down the scope of the work, and it won't include a lot of duct work, but it's pretty major system replacement. They'll actually take it to some specialized, and this is within the package we purchased, but they'll take it to some specialized estimators that actually are more on the pulse of the cost estimating, so that we have a better budget number prior to the adoption of the budget. We were hoping to have those already, but we don't have them.
So it's more complicated than like the public safety, where it sounds like there's more about putting a unit on the roof, and that's that,
Yeah.
right?
It is, we are still replacing some units on the roof as part of the library project, but they have one major air handler unit, which is in the basement, and that was part of the addition, the 1990 addition. And that unit is not producing the right amount of airflow to meet some of the air quality standards that we're trying to achieve today. So it's simply replacing compressors and condensers and motors isn't going to achieve what we want in that facility. So that unit will be taken out in pieces, essentially, because it's in a basement. And then the ancillary rooftop units will still be upgraded at the same time for that facility.
So you were replacing the basement one, or?
Yes, replacing it.
In the basement, or is that one?
In
now
the
going up?
basement.
Okay.
That's where your actually primary air handler equipment is. The
Okay.
rooftop is where your compressors and condensers will be.
Okay. And how easy is it to move it? If you're taking it out in pieces, I'm assuming you're putting it in pieces.
So what it does is somewhat influences what you can select to put back in there. They have to be a modular system that can actually physically go through. So when you walk down the alley next time by the library, you'll see a graded area just that's actually allowing airflow to get into the system in the basement. And so they'll have to take those grates out, the louvers that go into the building, and take out that piece and reinsert the new unit in through that location. You can't get it in through the stairwell. You'll have to use it through this. They'll lift it in down through this area well, if you will.
Oh, that in and of itself is expensive.
That's why next time you're having a cigarette, don't do it right outside the back of the library. 'Cause I'm just kidding. But I mean, it's part of the reason why there had been an issue with idling vehicles. There used to be service vehicles that would either come and provide deliveries to the library and or Fosdal's Bakeries and other things. And oftentimes they would idle in that location. And the intake system would bring that bad air into the building, if you will. So.
Oh, that is.
Moving on to the senior center. This is a relatively small item, but it is an important one. Kitchen range hood suppression system that's reached its useful life and needs to be replaced. This one is really an expensive item, but the senior center dishwasher and associated plumbing systems is really baffling how much these things cost. But it's in dire need. We repair it just to keep it alive, but it's in need of replacement, and that's about a $40,000 item. The lower concrete and spillway resurface project that was identified in previous years, we're showing that in here again as 2025 work. The main building and annex roof replacement. We think that we can make this roof be sustainable until 2025. It's not leaking now. It's a cedar shake roof. It has some growth on it, but we're not having any leaking issues with it. And
Rodney, I thought we had discussed last year not to put the cedar shingles back on, but
agreed.
to.
This isn't to replace it with that.
Right.
It's
So
with architectural steel.
Okay, we are doing that.
That's the plan, a cedar look,
Okay,
but an
good.
architectural type
For
steel.
the whole thing, it's all gonna
Yeah.
be, so you're gonna do it all at once?
All at once would be
Okay.
the proposal.
Excellent.
And actually on the screen, it shows the numbers related to that. Actually, the dishwasher system, I said 40. I was even wrong. It's 60. Very difficult to even think about a dishwasher system, but we do have commercial food service that's using that facility, so that is the current estimate. We don't think that it should be delayed.
That's something that we buy, we don't lease it or anything, or is that even an option?
I'm not aware of any leasing programs for something like this. I'd be surprised if there was such a program.
I
There
think
could
they
be.
do.
There
I
could
think
be.
UW
I don't
does.
know. Could be.
I think UW Food Science actually leases their dishwashers.
We can look into that to see if that really is a financial incentive to do so. I just don't know the answer to that.
You can't do several.
Oops.
Sorry. There's several companies and options for leasing that equipment. I can give you more information.
Okay. That was. So this leads into the next item, and it leads into our solar projects. We certainly have taken the effort seriously, and we've.
Oh, Greg?
Right, can I just a quick question back
Yeah.
on the suppression?
Yeah,
What is the material that they're using now?
I couldn't even tell you. It's a system that's right over top of their stoves. It's just
Yeah, right, but
so
you-
in
you
theory,
know,
it's never going to get used.
You don't know what the suppression material is?
I don't
Okay.
know what the product is.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I could find out though. I just don't know what
Yeah,
what
I'm
the product.
more curious than anything.
Okay, I'll find out more for you.
Thank you.
Christina, you're echoing. Do you have a comment, Christina?
I think I'm still gonna echo.
Oh, your mic, we can't hear you, Christina. Your mic is really off.
It's like you got two devices on, you need to mute one of them. It looks like you have two devices on, Christina. Can you mute one of them? It's causing feedback.
How's that?
No.
For now, shall I move on?
Sure. Can you put your answer in the chat, Christina? You're getting really bad feedback. We can't understand what you're saying. And probably mute your mic. Okay, go ahead, Rodney.
Sure. Solar projects. We actually have been working with a company to try to evaluate our facilities for solar on almost all of our main buildings here. And on this, the next page shows an illustration of a schematic where solar could be placed on both this building, both the fire department, both parts of the fire department. And really what that could do is offer an opportunity to provide solar power to both the fire department and to the Opera House. And so recognizing the Opera House doesn't lend itself probably appropriately for solar, but positioning it on the fire department could do that. So that,
What percentage of the electricity are you trying to offset?
as much as we can based on the space, but it's about 40%.
What? That's pretty good.
Similar, we already talked about replacing the senior center roof in 2025. That would also be in prep for the senior center to receive solar in 2026. You can see the primary location for that solar would be on the main building.
Can you, with respect to that, because I have the metal roof, the shingled
Yep.
look metal roof, and the solar company said that they couldn't put solar panels on the metal shingled roof. So I'm just making sure that you check that out before.
Yeah, we certainly would. Part of this is a budgetary number that's been put together related to this. Obviously, we'd have to evaluate the more specific design related to the roof. I mean, we also have to evaluate the roof structure. We think that it's fine, and so do the designers, but those are the items that we'd want to clarify before that would occur.
Is that part of the 260
Yes.
to evaluate the strength of the roof and then
Yep,
put
for the
steel?
anticipated
Okay.
solar, correct. City Hall in 2027, and the public safety building would be proposed to be done in 2028. Now, part of the strategy is making sure that we try to capitalize on the tax credit, or in our case, it wouldn't be a tax credit, but there's a 30% credit for solar projects up until 2032. And so we're mindful of that, and that's why we have these structured to be completed on those facilities prior to that. We also did analyze whether it would be beneficial to increase the solar capacity to our public works facility, because it's a large roof, of course. But that, in reality, when you start looking at what happens when you actually overproduce, which we would be doing in that building, it's not a cost-effective program, because you then end up putting power back onto the grid, and the rate at which you get your payback is less than what it's. You really want to try to capitalize on reducing your load in your facilities that you have, as opposed to trying to overproduce on different locations.
So speaking of overproducing, has there been any thought to solar batteries? I know they make them for residential houses now that are going solar, just because most of the power is produced in mornings and evenings. Most of the sun comes in during the day, and that way it saves it. Would that be a part of this, or is that feasible for these?
Storage?
I don't know if we'd find it to be scalable. We haven't explored that deeply for this size. I know that we've seen some of the residential facilities or residential homes have that done. And the ones that I'm aware of, it really allows them to store capacity to help them charge their car as well. And you understand what it's for, but it's an expensive investment for storage. And I don't know if the payback is there on this scale of a product, but it's certainly something we can explore. It's also something that can be added in afterwards. So it's not something you have to do initially. I'm familiar with, at least on a residential project, where they accomplish that by doing it as a second phase of their project.
The other thing, Rodney, with respect to solar panel, if there's a proposal from the police and fire to look at, whether or not they're going to stay in this building or renovate it. So, I mean, we don't want to put solar on if we're also going to be renovating or adding or doing anything else to these buildings too.
I think that'll factor into the discussion yet to be had. But what I don't anticipate doing is you'll recognize some of the buildings we have going a little later, but I don't know that we'd plan to, for example, for this building. This building really isn't designed to go upward, so it probably wouldn't be detrimental to put solar on this building, because I think it would probably get repurposed for some other government use, much like the senior center. Probably not an expansion, obviously, there. The EMS, I forgot to highlight it, but it's on this chart, EMS and food pantry. Actually, we think that's one of the lower hanging fruit locations, because it's got a nice flat roof, and we think that we can really capitalize on solar in that facility for that. But the Opera House Fire Department, even if things move forward with a new facility, that's not going to happen right away.
Right.
And there might be some public repurposing of the spaces, whether it's the fire department or EMS or even this building. So those would be discussions that could be finalized as you get closer to the year where you'd actually be doing solar on those facilities to make sure, confirm we're on the right path to move forward with that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. So you can see we spread the solar projects out somewhat in a way to try to obtain them, but also recognizing roof improvements in some of these buildings would occur. But 2024 to 2028, we'd have some pretty major solar installations occurring on our principal larger energy use buildings.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Now we're leading in and kind of segued into this. The emergency service space planning study. and I think the chief and others may have spoke to this a little bit in their presentations. I think we've recognized and admitted that we've outgrown the useful life of potentially this space or this building long-term for the police department. The police department has significant needs over time, but as we started to have that discussion, if you're evaluating a potential relocation or another facility for them, the other emergency services have anticipated needs as well. And collaboratively, the leadership from those organizations and the mayor and I met, and we started to discuss whether there might be synergies available to have at least evaluated whether there would be a joint complex that's created over time. Maybe it's even constructed in phases, but if there's an opportunity for whether it's manpower, meeting space, training space, whatever it might be, there might be some real opportunities to consolidate or contain some of those operations within the same facility. Now, that's not to say that the study would lead us down to a joint facility. Police department might have a good reason to all be in one facility. Fire department might not find them to actually have a need to have a satellite facility for certain uses in one primary location or multiple satellite locations. And EMS, how that ever factors in as well. So this study would really be geared to try to assess their needs going forward and the opportunities, if there are any, to consolidate, not necessarily consolidate services, but to consolidate into similar buildings or adjoining building spaces. I think you're seeing that happen in a number of communities in the neighborhood, and some of the other emergency service people can speak to that more than I can, but there certainly seems to be a trend to have some jointly housed emergency service operations. This doesn't dictate where it goes necessarily. This study evaluates the space that each is going to need for a period of time, and then tries to identify potentially whether they combine those spaces, and if that starts to provide direction, then start to potentially look at locations where that might fit. What type of acreage might be necessary? What type of region of the community makes sense for positioning of that building and or buildings to accommodate the expansion and continued growth in reality of all three of the services.
So it won't look at, like, I can't remember, a particular area of the city that would need, that makes the best sense for efficiencies to get to the stretches of the city.
So I'm not saying it won't look at that. I think first of all, you want to identify what each division's needs are going forward. And once you've identified that, then you can start to identify locations for those services. And whether it's in a combined facility, separate facility, or satellite facilities of certain services, I think that's going to be, I think it's going to be something that evolves as part of that study assessment. Because you're really giving it an opportunity to learn more about the long-term operations of each of those entities and what that may look like going forward. You know, you've heard from the fire department about potential housing of staff and or dormitory space, and so there's a number of operational things that I'm not even aware of, but I think all of them have you know, issues that they'll be having to address long-term related to how they're going to staff their operations and what the facilities might need to look like in order to do that. And not just their people, their equipment, the equipment needs. You know, all you got to do is look at this building. Not enough space that's really available even to accommodate the preservation of some of the equipment. You know, the valuable vehicles and tools that they use sit outside routinely all the time. So it's not just their operation, but even when you start looking at EMS right now, they may not be clamoring for additional space, but all you got to do is take a walk through some of those spaces and really see that they don't have extra area to really accommodate any additional growth. They have three bays And I'm told that oftentimes 2 of them are out and 1 is, so I think there's long-term, or not even that long-term, there's going to be a need to make an investment in a public safety operational facilities change for all of them.
Anybody have any questions?
So maybe I can just highlight one thing, not just because the police chief's in the building, but this was somewhat precipitated by a conversation that we were starting to have. Is there things in this building that we can do to improve operations temporarily and make their uses within the facility, I'll say, more bearable for a period of time? And or what level of investment do we make to do that? And are we spending money poorly in trying to do that? But we also recognize the smaller investments that we're making to improve the layout of some of their spaces now, recognizes that a new facility is not going to happen, in the next year or 2. It's going to take some time to develop a plan, a location, a strategy, and then ultimately construct it. You're really talking about probably a 3 to 5 year horizon would be my guess. I don't know, maybe it can be more accelerated, but nonetheless, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. We're trying to make modest modifications in the space in the public safety building to help them on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from anybody for Rodney?
So the number that we have there, the $140,000 for that study effort, we had understood that that's what McFarland recently had to go through something similar, and not that we're looking to them as the example, other than it's a real-time facility that's been recently opened. I think it just recently opened, didn't it? So it's pretty fresh. It's not something that's been done a long time.
So Rodney, with the building plan, and based on our discussion yesterday about the powerhouse, is that something that we could add in here too? I mean, when was the last time we've had anybody go evaluate the powerhouse with respect to structure viability and the roof and all that?
It's been a number of years. We had temporary repairs made a number of years ago, minor repairs, nothing substantive. Today, we engaged, at least for an initial person to go through it, a gentleman who's on our Landmarks Commission, Mr. Udstun, who's actually the Brickworks gentleman. Not even to give us a specific proposal, but get a different set of eyes to really look at, highlight some things that we wouldn't see as casual viewers of it. It's going to take somebody to assess that and really understand what we want to do with it. I think one of the complicating factors that has been involved there is what's going to happen adjacent to it and when that's going to happen, and does that impact what gets done to the building at all. For example, the tail race is supposed to be filled as part of the Riverwalk project. Without that being done, that's probably one of the areas of most concern, truthfully, about the integrity of the building. So that hasn't been done yet. I'm not saying there isn't other things on the building, but in my mind, that's a pretty significant area to be addressed. And do you install expensive sheet piling in somewhat of a temporary fashion, expensive, the temporary, only to anticipate that tail race to be filled? If we looked at the schedule, that was going to be happening already, right? So,
Right.
So those are some of the things that factor into it. We're open to having whatever done, whatever, but it is a complicated factor. You mentioned others that are kind of evaluating the building or visualizing what could happen there. It's one thing to get somebody to visualize what can happen there. We've all recognized it takes somebody that's going to make it happen.
I know,
Whether
and
it's the city and or private endeavors.
And to get more investors, I think, interested in it, it can't be a building that's falling down or that needs major repairs or I mean, it's gonna take a major investment, but if it has, you know, lots of tuck pointing and a leaky roof, all of a sudden the value, I think, goes down, because then all of a sudden you're going to have a lot more expense, because now it's a rotten building as opposed to just a deserted building. So, I mean, could we at least put in this year evaluation of what needs to be done, or somebody else
Yeah.
chime in?
We can do whatever we want to do.
Well, I know, but I'm not a construction person like you guys are. If you could say what you would recommend. You gotta remember, I'm just a biologist, so buildings, I'm just kind of muffling my way through.
Well, if you look
So,
at the microbes that are in there, let us know.
I don't wanna know what the black mold situation looks like in there.
Well, obviously, it needs to be evaluated, and to have it done correctly, you know, we have somebody who's going to look at, a mason looking at it right now, but that's not necessarily an engineer, or someone who looks at the whole structure and understands what's going on with it. It's going to cost money to do that. So we need to put money into the budget so that we can do that. How much do you put in? That's the question. And then the second part of that is that once it's evaluated and saying, well, yeah, this corner of the building is going to come down the next 6 months, then what do we do if we don't have money in the budget for it?
Amend the budget. I mean, that's our option. I mean, I think we have to put something in there, and we need to get, you know, it evaluated as soon as possible, so it doesn't fall into the river and the tailways.
We'd love to have somebody help identify who would be appropriate to do it and the scope of work that you're hoping to have done. So just so people know, I've been in the basement of that building. The basement is rock solid. You have a poured foundation. That's not to say there aren't masonry issues above grade, but below grade, you've got a solid foundation. I'm not saying there's never been any water in it, but I've been underneath that structure, and you've got a solid base to work with. Now what you want to do is deal with the top. But I am seriously concerned about the area to the south, the tail race area. The northeast corner, there is some tuck pointing stuff that needs to be done there. There hasn't been any recent additional movement of that. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be repaired, but there hasn't been any visible additional deterioration to that corner that I'm aware of. And I'm not the structuralist analyst, but I'm just telling you what my observations are. The ceiling tile or the roof tiles are called federal tile. They're kind of an integrated they're integrated structural as well as roofing material. Mm-hmm. That's pretty challenging even to find folks that are skilled and educated enough to how to repair and or replace. So it's going to take somebody that has the appropriate skill set to evaluate it and then ultimately make repairs to it.
Greg, put your mic on.
Yeah. Sorry, thank you. A few years ago, we went down there. I believe there were a couple of people who were historic architects or preservation people. And if I remember right, they were saying that, well, that northeast corner you're talking about, that was their main concern at that point. But about the roof, I think they were saying that that material was no longer available. You couldn't even get it. That seems to be what I remember.
Yeah, certainly possible.
Okay.
Yeah, there's limited availability of that product and people that know how to work with that product.
So we'd have to try and find something that would be historical, that would match or come close.
It really depends on what level of repair and or replacement is necessary. You know, you mentioned something that really sheds some additional light on it. over the last 5 years, I probably toured that building with 4 or 5, if not 6 different entities that really had strong interest in trying to help repurpose that building. And we've all been holding out hope that somebody would come through with a grandiose plan to help us through that process. And I think that's kind of, I'll say, influenced where we're at now, because we've been optimistic and hopeful that area is going to get reinvigorated and somebody's going to come and really be a partner with us to help champion the restoration of that facility. That hasn't happened yet. I'm not saying it won't, but it hasn't yet. And it's difficult to find life for that building by itself at this point.
No, I think you're absolutely correct that once we get the water park in and the tail races filled in and there's some movement in the riverfront, I think there's going to be a lot more interest. And I think COVID really tanked ideas because nobody was going to invest in restaurants, brew pubs, or anything for 3 years. And that's what needs to go probably there. But right now, I guess my main concern is to evaluate, besides, the tail race side of the thing, but I think we need to know what needs to be repaired and the costs. And so, yeah. So if you're looking for kind of direction, I would say, first is, to get an engineer in there to evaluate the structure and give us a cost estimate for repair, and then.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think if you wanted to put money into the CIP for next year to do that or whatever, you could probably put an amount that included kind of the initial evaluation.
Yep.
And be realistic. There are repairs that would be probably needed to occur. So even if you put a number that was in addition to just the evaluation, if you put, there's building maintenance dollars, right, that we talked about. Even if you orchestrate that so that gets inserted into the budget for next year.
Yep.
As part of the borrowing or the fund that's available to us already and gets earmarked for that, then that's charting the course. You want the evaluation, but again,
use the earmark, and then we'll probably have to up it depending on what they find.
and my plea is to hopefully have some assistance understanding who we can engage to help do that properly, and helping us evaluate what the scope of that service should be.
Lisa?
On campus.
Well,
We
and the landmarks.
have the UW Milwaukee Architectural School. Those are two sources that we can tap to find out source. I mean, it's not like we can't do that.
No. I think, doesn't Landmarks have a list of potential people?
We certainly can call and lean on them. That's not an issue. I'm just, again, hoping that somebody can help scope the effort. How far do we look at the timing of the tail race, and how does that factor into the evaluation, or does it at all? Do we just evaluate the building on its merits with that in its condition, or should we be evaluating whether some more immediate tail race work has to be done? I mean, so it's just an onion that we have to unpeel together.
Lisa first and then.
Well, I just wondered if it, should be forwarded to Landmarks as an agenda item, just to have a discussion, just to see, so those of us on Landmarks, and especially those who, as you said, have some of that knowledge, maybe they have some suggestions and put it in, on their plate for a bit, so that, they're having a discussion about possible options and that sort of thing, because they would have to be involved in anything that happens anyway, right?
Ultimately, they'd be involved in a certificate of appropriateness about what improvements or repair work was done. They don't have to be involved in any. we're gonna use them as a resource, but they don't have to be involved in anything other than review the certificate of appropriateness. Even outside of having the whole committee or commission look at it, you know, Peggy's a resource. So I think we could start there and see if she has any recommendations on consulting for us.
And you said Dave is gonna come out as well,
Yeah, we've got a message into him with hopes of doing so. He's done some minor repair work on some of our buildings, but he has an education in that, so we want to get an initial look at
Right.
the immediacy of some of the items to make sure there isn't something that has to be addressed, you know, post haste.
You were talking about the, wondering when we should do certain things because of the possibility of the tail race and so matter. I hate to say it, but at the rate we're going, the building could be in the ground before we get some of the answers. I think we need to evaluate the building for what it is now and get it stabilized for what it is now, not for what it could be in the future, because if we wait for the future, it never comes.
Yep, well, ideally, yeah. I
No,
think we have to.
not ideally.
No, I'm just saying, ideally, I didn't finish my sentence. Ideally, the tail race will be filled in 2025. That's the ideally. But we need to not do the ideally and just get this building preserved.
Just stabilize.
Yep. So what kind of other direction do you need from us, Rodney and Dave? So we have what was it that you sent us, 165?
115.
115.
I think it was 115.
115, should we add at least another 100 to that for some basic work?
Let's see.
I don't know what the right number is, but I think it would be good to capture it in the CIP.
Right, so that's what I'm saying, to put it in, we have the 115, I would, up it.
When do you need to have a final number, Dave, so we could have it approved? You don't need that tonight, do you?
No, I don't need it tonight, but the sooner the better, because in theory, whatever's approved tonight, we start putting into BSNA so that we can start seeing where all the numbers go forward. That's not to say that we can't change anything up through November 7th, of course.
Then I move to put in $200,000.
How much?
200.
$200,000 above the 115? So it'd be a total of $350.
Because truthfully, if the roof needs to get replaced, it's going to take a good chunk of that.
Okay. So for the CIP borrowing, we have $200,000, and out of the other budget that you had found, it'd be the 115. So 315 total.
Okay,
The 115 is not really budgeted right now because we can't roll it over.
correct. We have to put it into the budget. So then the next question is, you're talking 315,000. My last estimate is you're only going to have 240,000 in fund balance available. Do you want to bond for the difference? Do you want to bond for everything?
I would prefer the bond for everything myself because we're not going to borrow the money till the spring anyway, and we may need the rest of it for operations.
I agree.
Okay. People are bobbling their heads, so I guess that's all in agreement.
So instead of saying
Lisa?
something, sorry, bob their heads.
well, I'll probably say something that's very unpopular, especially since I am on the Landmarks Commission, but I'm thinking about a building that might be stabilized for $300,000. And, the reality of somebody purchasing that and being able to renovate it, I'm a little concerned about just, approving, and I assume we would evaluate, what an engineer would say, but I don't want that to end up as a albatross, because it's a lot of money. And then we would, I mean, just to get that money back and then sell it and have somebody roll in another $500,000, I don't know. I love the idea of that building being renovated, but I'm not sure I could jump on board with that kind of money right off the bat.
If I
Well,
can,
the other thing that,
if I can interrupt quick.
Go ahead.
I believe you've only got a motion. I don't believe you have a second. Thank you.
so the other thing that we're in the process of, or we've been having discussions about updating our project plan for TID 8. We're a couple years behind on the TIF, and we're trying to get to a point where we can really understand where we need to go with that district. You know, in a perfect world, you know, this building could be sold, somebody could redevelop, it could be part of the district. We can't do that if we own the building. So there is a potential that if there isn't major renovations needed immediately, that could still happen, and somebody could use the historical tax credits to do it if the city chose to sell it to a private developer. So I think there's a lot of unknowns, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. But what we do know is if we, you know, want to preserve the building, we have to at least do the maintenance required to keep the thing, you know, from falling down or from leaking or whatever we think is going to cause even more damage, which costs more money later. So, I mean, that's kind of the struggle.
Well, the struggle is we want to keep it structurally intact, so we have the opportunity to be able to have somebody develop it. If it falls into the river because we didn't do our due diligence, we didn't save a historical building, that's on us. I mean, there's a lot of people in this community. If you think people are upset about removing the dam, if we let this powerhouse go into the river, then we deserve to have our heads roll. So I think, you know, it is a lot of money. I get it. We're not saying that we're definitely going to be using the $300,000. First, we just need to have it assessed and then decide what needs to be done. But if we don't even assess it, we're not doing our job. So, because we don't really take, I guess, we recommend this to the full council. We got a motion and a second. Do we even need to take a vote? Because it's not.
Well, it's an action to add it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're adding it to the CIP.
Okay.
I think it's appropriate,
Yeah,
in my
go for
opinion.
it.
All right, so all in favor of kind of doing the 300,000, 115 that needs to be repurposed or whatever the magic that Dave does, and then the extra $200,000. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
No.
So motion carries with 1 no. All right. Anything else that we want to talk to Rodney about with what he presented tonight with the plan commission? Or not the plan commission, but planning department? Am I? Seeing none? Okay. Moving on to Dave, the capital improvement plan version 6.
It's now version 7,
Okay.
but anyway.
All right, well,
I guess it's kind of up to you folks. You know, you can vote on it by department. You could say, in general, we're happy with everything and we want to tweak a few line items. We've got a number of department heads that are either here physically or here via Zoom that can answer potential questions.
how do you guys want to proceed? You want to do it by department? What are your thoughts? Anybody have any thoughts? No. Let's do it by department. Let's just kind of go that route. And then people, if you have any questions or any concerns, we can discuss it. If nobody raises anything, we'll assume that by no bobbleheads that you approve. So first on there is, I'm looking at your version that's up there. You got, they're not kind of grouped.
Well,
The
I guess
first couple are. Why don't you,
I've got the spreadsheet on sorted alphabetical order by department.
okay?
So city clerk is up first for 4 additional. It says voting machines. It should be the Badger books.
Second from the bottom.
Nope, not that. It looks like this, Lisa. This one. So,
Well, that's for next
that's
year.
for stage
For next year.
yeah.
So we're just focusing on the 2024 column.
Okay, go ahead, Dave. So those are the Badger books.
Yeah, 4 of them totaling 8224.
And then the EMS is next.
Okay, I assume no questions on the city clerk. The EMS is next. Yeah, that's basically taking what the council approved in resolution 3923, using ARPA funds for the ambulance along with grant proceeds. We're not going to get the chassis till 24, so we need to budget it in 24. Unless I'm told otherwise by this committee, I'm going to assume we're going to again use ARPA funds as the council had requested already.
Yep, so we're not borrowing for that, so,
Correct.
okay.
Finance department, that's a 25 item. And fire department's next alphabetically. I believe Josh is here. He was. He got a call. Okay.
Well, it says rec
Okay, he gets
department on
nothing.
mine.
Yeah, we're not in alphabetical on the
Oh.
spreadsheet one. or on the-
Do you want to throw yours up there?
I can, yes.
Let's do that.
And then-
Well, the only people on Zoom can see it.
Oh, well, then you can just look at the screen then.
That's
Good
not
luck.
gonna work.
The problem is I changed the order on the spreadsheet, as I'm looking at things, so it's sorted 300 times a day.
Well,
If
could
you
you quick,
Go by this order.
Oh, okay, we can do that. Okay, rec programs. I believe Dan is still online. Dan, are you here?
yeah, he's here.
Do you, does anybody have any questions on anything that Dan has requested for rec programs?
For 2024, we're only looking at 2024 at this point, right?
Correct. Yes, you can make changes moving something from 25 to 26 or whatever if you want, but the tax levy is what we're really trying to look at now, so the 24 is what you should be concentrating on.
Oh, you just flipped it.
There's a couple pages of it.
So, Dan, on this, I guess it's hard to see what is actually that needs to be borrowed as opposed to grants. The red is that we have things that are paid for, but what would be the total of borrowing, I guess?
Tim, if you go to the city website, the addendum that came in this morning from Ellers has a kind of succinct
Okay, yeah, I think I have.
total.
Back up.
Thought I had it downloaded. Okay, I'll get to it. open, but I didn't. I closed it.
You just go to the.
This one here?
Yes. And of course, it gets a little bit more complicated. On Eller's spreadsheet, you've got the park projects, and then some of the TID8 projects are parks. But if you go to my spreadsheet and just adding everything up, Dan's net figure is approximately $8.4 million for his request for bond issues.
And that's just this year.
That is just calendar year '24.
Does everything need to be in, are some of these projects ahead of their time?
I mean, the only one that could possibly, like large dollar amount one that could be pushed back would be racetrack, but we're trying to line that up with racetrack road construction.
Gonna have a busy year. All right, does anybody have any concerns over what Dan has outlaid for 2024? Lisa?
No, not for Dan, but so Ellers, did they raise any red flags or concerns or anything, Dave, about the amount we're looking at potentially?
Well, it's not a concern per se, but between road construction and all the projects, we're looking to bond about $17 million. That's quite a bit. The projections I had in there before do show an increase. Actually, Tim's got page 2 of Eller's on there. And if you're looking at the 24, they've got a net debt service levy of $4.45 million. I'd estimated 4.4, so it's within the ballpark. But that means the debt levy is going up $476,000 as compared to 23. We're not talking a heck of a lot, but yes, this is a lot of projects out there, but we're trying to add a lot of things into the park system. So they didn't, Ellers did not bring up any concerns that they had. We tried as much to smooth everything for the next few years. We just looked at 24 and 25 because once you get past that, it's harder to assume that costs are right, but we're looking at 24, 25, and 26 adding about $475,000 to the debt levy each year, and then 27 it starts dropping. Now you could have that fire engine, that ladder truck, $2 million by itself in 26, 27, 28, somewhere in there. So we gave ourselves a little bit of wiggle room, knowing in the future that things are going to drop. I can't imagine that we are going to do the dollar amounts of bonding for parks that we're doing right now every year. We're not going to.
We don't have that much.
Right, you're not going to see.
We have just a lot of development right now.
Correct. So we're not going to see an $8 million request every year from Dan.
The only other big thing that would be a big ticket item in the next 3 to 5 years would be a new building, which would be huge.
New building for.
When you talking about the.
Yes, that would skew all the numbers. If you're looking at McFarland, I think the number I heard was $65 million for their facility.
Well, then 17 million is just, you know, pocket change.
Well, I think the other unknown is what's gonna happen, you know, long-term on the Stoughton Trailers property with that park.
Okay, so I was
Yeah.
really off. It's 28 million.
Oh, okay, I was like,
I don't know where I got the number 65 from then, but it sounded good.
Yeah, so I think that's
Scary,
the
scary.
other unknown is gonna be the park out on 51 and B. And
but that's one park versus this, the next, I mean, he has like 4 or 5 parks that we're dealing with.
The biggest chunk of money is $2.5 million for phase one.
that's basically redoing the parking lot, which needs to be done, and doing it in a way where it's done properly. It's been, I don't know how many years since we had a major investment at Matt Park, and if you've been down there, you can see that just by looking at it.
Is it the Dan, correct me, is it the parking lot and the road? We're taking out a road and widening the upper road.
So, yeah, the Man Park project, that includes removing the northern section of Man Parkway and replacing it with a trail. Then the parking lots, there would be a parking lot along 4th Street, and then the southern Man Parkway roadway being reconstructed and like it's in the master plan. So it goes to the south, which makes the angle of the corner over by the wastewater station, the turn, more conducive for large vehicles. And then also the parking lot near the pickleball courts getting redone as well. And then the project also includes putting in a restroom in the northwest corner of the park like the master plan recommends.
Okay. Yep.
Large vehicle radius turns,
For the fair and also for sewage treatment.
okay, so why is the parks paying for sewage treatment's better access?
Because the road is in the park, and really, we're eliminating the current road and putting a loop in there by the bus garage. So that loop will serve the park, it'll serve the bus garage, and it'll serve the wastewater. The wastewater only uses it a couple times a year when they pump out the sludge.
It's just the proximity.
My
of
point is that,
You think utilities should pay for part of the road?
and the school district. I'm sorry, but you know, hey.
It's true.
By the way, could somebody come and redo my driveway for me because it's getting pretty bad? Could pay for that too.
Those are all good points.
They're
But
points I'd like to see before we start shelling out lots and lots of dollars.
If that's what you're looking at, I think we need to start asking those two entities basically tomorrow, because, for instance, the school district, I'm just going to throw out numbers, 800,000. If they're asked to pay 800,000, that would be an operational expense for them. They couldn't issue debt for it, and I don't know if they could quickly come up with that money. So I think if that's what this committee wants, we need to start the, lack of better terms, negotiations now.
Actually, I'd like them to move their garage.
Well, that's another point, you know, it's like.
I mean, I mean, right now, we're upkeeping all the roads and everything for their bus garage. And it's in a park. Those are, you know, discussions for, I don't know when. We keep on trying to get a discussion with
It
them.
seems like, you know, if we're gonna have that discussion, and, you know, it should have been part of the master plan. it's kind of hard to do it now when we've already approved the master plan. And oh, by the way, now we want you to help pay for it. And long-term, we're hoping there's an exit strategy for the school district, but I've been told that's an 18-month process for them. Their fiscal year is different than ours. It runs, June to July. So their budget was done last October already, so.
Well, they don't show up to any meetings that we've had to
Yeah.
talk about it.
We can
so-
certainly engage with conversations with them. They've been told that their focus right now is implementing the referendum dollars that they approved and getting those buildings started in the spring. We're gonna need this road done whether utilities or the school district uses it or not to serve our park.
Yeah. Gina?
Greg?
Yeah, I can't agree with that. This is our choice. We're making this choice to make these changes to the park. They don't have a say in it, and it's really not gonna make any difference. I mean, they're gonna use it one way or the other. I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me that we're trying to do that. I wouldn't agree with that. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Don't agree with what, delaying this, or?
No. To try and negotiate with the sewer, with utilities and with the school district, because they didn't ask us to do this. We're doing this on our own. We're the ones that said that we want to make this change to the park to make it more utilized, more useful. They didn't ask for that. So why would we make them pay for it?
Any other comments? Rodney?
Maybe if I can just add one thing related to public streets. This is entirely public, it's within the park, but it also provides street frontage to, I'll call them two businesses. Both happen to be government businesses, but it's not unlike a different street where we make improvements or changes to it. You may be able to explore some special assessment aspects of it. Haven't explored that yet, but we assess for curb and gutter and sidewalk on public streets. You might have the ability to special assess for that type of improvement for the frontages of those facilities. If you're wanting to explore somewhat of a more equitable way to figure out a cost associated with that, that might be one avenue.
But that would have to be decided tonight?
Special assessments don't have to be decided tonight. Obviously, you're going to bond for the whole thing, even if you special assess for it, but you'd get money back over time, over the course of upwards of 10 years potentially, depending on the amounts. Again, I don't know if that's an option, but if you're looking at a public street, that's how we recoup some costs related to the street improvements.
Okay, thanks for your input. Did you have any other things that you want to say?
I'm good.
Anybody else? So we're moving forward with all the Park and Rec's plan right now and possibly looking for special assessments for utilities and school district for their use. I mean, I'm just listening to you folks, so I need to know what you guys are actually thinking. Anybody else have any thoughts? Phil?
I don't know, I think I agree with Greg. I mean, we're having the improvements made. The street's gonna be there no matter what. The improvements will be made to the street just because they are benefiting from the improvements, but everybody is benefiting from the improvements to the street. So, and whether,
So should it have been under Public Works as a public street then?
except that it's in a park.
Then it's not a
So-
public street.
But it's a public street that's in a park. Don't know. You got me on that one, Tom.
trying to get you on anything.
But it's
I'm just asking the questions.
Yeah, but if it's part of a park improvement, then
Well, I mean, that's, first you have to decide what it is.
Either way,
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
if it's utilities that pays for it, that's, taxpayers are still paying for that. And if it's a school district that's paying for it, it's still gonna be the taxpayers paying for it. So in the end, we're still paying for it.
True.
And so,
and whether the bus garage is there or not, we would still be having this improvement made.
yeah. And wastewater's not going anywhere,
So let me ask you this question.
just one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I'll ask it for Rodney. Are we engineering this road? Will it be designed for heavy duty, even though it's a park road, which is light traffic? Are we designing it for heavy duty traffic?
I haven't been
Fairborn.
involved, but I certainly think that it would be, irrespective of the wastewater treatment plant. The park use has semi-truck traffic, cattle hauling traffic, and other users that would probably warrant the pavement design to accommodate both.
All right. And buses?
Yeah.
And heavy buses?
Well, the buses aren't heavy because they're not filled at that time, but it is
Heavier than a car?
it's the tractor poles and all the fair equipment. That is the heavy part.
For the next 5 years.
All right, so yes, for at least the next 5 years. All right, are we gonna move forward with this? Please bubble your heads one way or the other. All right, good. Whew. All right, moving on to what, is it Public Works?
Public Works, yeah.
So we
Yes,
don't-
Public Works is next.
Lots of street improvement, some vehicles. Lisa?
Hey, Brett, did you say you were gonna provide, or maybe I missed it, I mean, I think the asphalt zipper seems great, but do you have data on how long it might take to recoup some of those funds, or?
Yeah, good question. We're still putting that together, that analysis. Still waiting for some numbers on the pulverization end of that from our contractors. So we'd have that put together in the next, I want to say the next 2 weeks. I think we'd have better idea of what our rate of return on that unit would be.
And then a follow-up question, do you know how long have these things been around? I was just curious if other cities have had them for a number of years and they're easy keepers, or if they are expensive to maintain, or can you guys work on them, those sorts of things for long-term?
Yep, all good questions. We've been around since the 80s. This style since the early 2000s, however, and they've made significant improvements in the last 23 years with these. We've heard that a lot of agencies are keeping these. They still have the original models, if you will. And then they also, they trade them in for newer models. Some have traded for newer models. The teeth do need to be replaced depending on usage. Basically, each tooth is $12. So that's all going to be part of the analysis as part of the operational costs of those. We've also looked into the fuel. The pony motor on those are pretty rock solid. They're all diesel engines. So we've heard really no issues with those from a maintenance standpoint. As you know, we have a great maintenance team on hand, so we don't foresee any problems with those going forward.
Thank you.
All right. Just before we move on, Dan put in the chat, Southern Matt Parkway is being widened by 6 feet. We are working on scheduling geotech and haven't gotten to the base course and asphalt material discussion yet. Strand is aware of the vehicles that use the road. So that's okay. For Public Works, Dave, you still have in yellow that the city welcome signs are ARPA funds. I thought we were moving that not in ARPA funds, but just borrowing.
I asked for clarification and
And I thought we
nothing
gave
was
it to you.
given. I need some clarification, please.
Yeah, we were pretty clear that night that it's not ARPA fund, it's borrowing.
Then I will specifically request a motion so that there's a vote on it so that we can document it for our federal reporting.
Can I have a motion, somebody? It's 110,000.
That's for one site, correct?
No. Brett, is that for 3 signs, 110?
Correct.
All right. So I have a motion by Alder Majewski. Do I have a second? Second by Sherlocki. Any amendments? All in favor to move funding for the welcome signs from ARPA to borrowing our CFP funds, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Is that what you need, Dave?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else in Public Works that people, Brett's still on the line, that people want to discuss? Seeing none. Let's move on to police. Chief Jenks is in the room. Is there anything that, there's only just a few items in 2024. The biggest ticket item is the body cam replacements for 101. Lisa?
Probably a question for Dave. I think, I mean, I'm in favor of all the requests, and I presume then that because the police cameras and the policy program do have operational costs, so I assume that'll be part of, I guess, are you comfortable, Dave? I don't know if you've gotten to the operational budget much yet, because I think the policy program you said could go up 3 to 5% a year. So, I mean, I guess I'm just,
Well,
that's sort of an asterisk just to make sure that that's.
And no, I haven't gotten that far into it, but Chief Jenks and I did discuss that the ongoing maintenance type issues has to go into his operational budget. So in theory, with the debt levy or the net new construction of 2%, in theory, all the departments are going to ask for only 2% increase. I know that's not going to happen, but as we get further into it, I'll be working with the department heads to, for the additional things. Chief, do you know if you did add in the operational costs for those?
No, they wouldn't be incurred until 25.
Okay, so subsequent year
Yes.
is when you'll see it.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions for Chief Jenks? Nope, moving on. Next, I guess Senior Center doesn't have anything in 2024.
Correct, that's been moved to 25. As I said, I made a kind of an executive decision on that one.
Okay. So the next is IT and media. We got Director Montgomery here. Does anybody have any questions, any concerns? A lot of head shaking. So I'm assuming that's okay. All right. We're good to go on that one. Next is the library. Got computers, the self-checkout machine. Any concerns with the library? Nope, okay, that's good. No, Director Ramsey was on before. Next up is the fire department. Their big ticket item is airline installation, so water rescue, their thermal imaging cameras. They all said that they were outdated. The big ticket item is the PPE, personal protective equipment, which we obviously don't want them to be slighted on. Anybody have any questions, concerns, changes? All right, goes forward. Planning. Dr. Shield is still in the house. We haven't allowed him to leave. Everything that you presented with the inclusion of the powerhouse, I think is all, building maintenance is got to keep what we have, our investment going, otherwise it's going to be a lot more costly going down the road. Anybody have anything that they want to add, change? Seeing none, I take that as a going forward. And then the last item on the thing is the 140 to start planning for the space requirements for our emergency police, fire, and EMS. Anybody have any concerns about that? No, I think that's it. Thank you, Dave. Is there anything else that you want to go through? Do we need a motion to approve? You got a motion to approve to council with the amendments of the powerhouse and other things? We can't hear you, Greg.
That'll bring it up to a little over 11 million then with the adjustments.
No, you're not including the road construction projects.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
The new total is 16,648,475. And I would recommend a motion to recommend version 7 with that total to the city council.
So moved
Yes,
by
David.
Greg. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by
Flip a coin.
Brett. I got to do it on that side of the room for the evening. Anybody else have anything else? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Guess the motion carries. Thank you, Dave and Rodney and all the other directors and leadership team that are online. Thank you for all your hard work in putting this together. Well done. Thank you, Mayor, for leading. All right, next thing on the agenda is Tom's buying everybody margaritas.
Kick ass.
Move to approve.
Move to
approve.
Move to approve.
Is that a binding
We need the margaritas.
All right. We move to adjourn. Second. Second by Greg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Again, thank you for all your hard work. It's scary.